What's up, everyone? Welcome to this day in Philly sports history for December 27th, 2024. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Welcome to a feel-good Friday edition in the week that time forgot. Every day is a Friday right now, but officially feel-good Friday. Shout out to everyone out there who still is working during this holiday week. We appreciate you. Before we get started, let's do some housekeeping. First, be sure to follow me on social media, Jimbo_Mont at Twitter and TikTok. On Instagram, at PhillyJimbo. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jimbo_Mont. Continue to spread the word. If you're sitting around having 9 a.m. mimosas or Bloody Marys or still drinking eggnog, it's all good. Spread the word. Tell somebody who hasn't listened, and let's continue this grassroots movement to grow this thing. Like I said, we've been featured in the On Pattison newsletter, which is awesome. Still working on some things with the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame. It's been a pretty good year. I know 2025, sky's the limit. Lots of good things on the horizon. So thank you, and continue to spread the word. Let's start with a recap of yesterday's question of the day. I asked you, based on the Christmas Day win over the Celtics, is your opinion on the Sixers changing at all? 67% of you said no, and not totally shocking, but as you know, I'm back on. I think I saw a stat yesterday that they've only played 3 games with Tyrese, Joe, and Paul George completing a full game, and they're 3-0 in those games. And I didn't look to see who they played or anything like that. I'm sure one of them was against the Hornets, but that's telling. And like I said, I heard people saying, oh, well, Boston didn't come out with this energy. And it is what it is. You went up to Boston on Christmas Day, stood up to their rally late, and came in, hit some big shots, made some big foul shots at the end. I think this team has turned the corner. And I'm sure somebody's going to clip this and play it back to me when they inevitably fail and fall flat on their face. But I'm back in. 67% of you are not. I can totally see them going on a nice little run here and making some noise. But thank you, as always, for participating in the question of the day. There will be another one later in the show. I did miss this the other day. KJ Martin is out a couple weeks with, I believe it was an ankle injury. So they won't have him. But if Caleb Martin and Yabusele and Oubre continue to play the way they've been playing, I think we're going to be all right. I think that was my biggest takeaway from Christmas, and I said this yesterday. The fact that they were able to give those Joe and Paul George extended rest time because the bench played so well. But the Sixers are off today. They pick up tomorrow in Utah. Flyers are also ready to go out on a West Coast swing. They will be in Anaheim on Saturday as well. And you all know how I feel about West Coast games. So it doesn't look like we'll be watching any Sixers or Flyers for a few days here. Be sure to check out my boys over at the Clashing Conferences, doing great things with their Sports Fan Network. You can check them out anywhere you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And if you missed yesterday, still time to go do some last minute, late, whatever you want to call it, holiday shopping. Spend the money that grandma gave you and go to Philly Goat. They have you covered, whether you want coffee, t-shirts, whatever, they got you covered. So go to phillygoat.com, use the promo code Jim Montgomery to take 10% off of your order. All right, some Eagles news. And the big story yesterday was the quote-unquote altercation between Zach Ertz and Nick Sirianni. And first and foremost, I think it's blown out of proportion. We know how Nick is. I can totally see, and I saw some video of it too. But as much as we all love Zach Ertz, I can totally see Zach Ertz getting caught up in the moment and getting pissed off. Apparently, Nick was obviously mad about the loss. Zach went over to shake Nick's hand, saw he wasn't ready, and gave him a high five instead. Apparently, Nick did not like the force behind the high five, said something. Zach Ertz said something back. Nick Sirianni basically said, you had one catch, you did nothing to contribute to the win. Zach Ertz took offense to that. They had to be separated. Apparently, they're all good. I've seen both of them interview now. Zach Ertz was like, hey, I'm fine, man. I love Coach. It just is one of those things. But, of course, the Sirianni haters, as soon as they lose a game, they're back out. I feel like the Sirianni haters are a lot like Cowboy fans who lay dormant until they see a chance and an opportunity. Is it a good look for Coach? No. However, I mean, I think it was blown out of proportion. Zach Ertz said as much. I feel like it's just one of those things. Guys argue and yell all the time. This would have been a non-story if it wasn't Sirianni. And I think Jeff McClain is the one that put it out on his podcast on the Eagles. And like I said, you see crazy stuff like this randomly, like guys refusing to high five, guys doing this, that, and the other after the post-game thing. This would have been a non-story if it wasn't Nick Sirianni. So I'm not looking too much into that, but I figured it was such a big story that I had to mention it. But again, the cockroaches came out just like Cowboys fans. It's seen an opportunity. Oh, look at the coach. And if the Eagles would have won that game, I bet you there probably would not have been this much of a story either. So in all fairness, though, I did have to talk about it. The one thing Nick did say is that Jalen still was in concussion protocol, probably trending toward him not playing. I know earlier in the week, LaShawn McCoy made a comment like, oh, he's not playing. And then when asked, he just kind of gave a look like he knows some things. Kenny Pickett with the ribs said he was good to go. So it looks like Kenny Pickett's going to get the start. They did sign Ian Book, who has played some preseason games and been on the roster with them, I guess just to be safe as the emergency quarterback. But other than that, the Eagles are relatively healthy. It looks like they're going to have their full complement of players. Looking for the defense to kind of step back and get back to where they were, kind of where they were the first half of the Washington game. However, that does lead to today's question of the day. Can the Eagles win with Kenny Pickett on Sunday at quarterback? 267-495-8531. That'll get you in. I'm not as down on Kenny Pickett as a lot of people were. I know he had his struggles in Pittsburgh, but I also saw another stat that he has 24 career starts, and he's 14-10 in those starts. So he can beat some teams, and it's not like you're going to have a Cowboys team that is full strength. They have the backup quarterback, no CeeDee Lamb. The defense is going to be gunning for him and being ready. That's fine. But I think with a full week of game planning to have Kenny Pickett as the starter, I think it's going to matter, because I've heard so many people talk about it this week that once Jalen went down, you don't necessarily change the game plan mid-game like that. So they continued to run the same game plan, and that's why you saw Washington shut down Saquon and really dare Kenny Pickett. And the truth of the matter is, Devontae makes that catch, we win the game. And I think Kenny, with a full week, knowing he's going to start, I think knowing that the game plan is going to be tailored to his skill set, I think they're going to be all right. But what do you think? Can the Eagles win on Sunday with Kenny Pickett at quarterback? 267-495-8531. That's the Back to the Future voice and text line. I do feel more confident with Kenny Pickett than I did with Gardner Minshew a couple years ago. So there is that. But I think they'll be fine as long as everybody else does what they're supposed to do. It's going to come down to the defense, really. Make life miserable for Cooper Rush. Like I said, no CeeDee Lamb for the Cowboys. And I do think it looks like Kenny Pickett. The line did move. It was like 10, 9.5, 10. It's down to 7 now. That kind of tells me that Vegas is expecting for Kenny Pickett to play. But there's still no reason. I say go in here, win the game, clinch the division, essentially clinch the number 2 seed, and then just give everybody the week off against the Giants and get ready for the playoffs. But what do you think? Can the Eagles win on Sunday with Kenny Pickett? Let me know on the Back to the Future voice and text line. All right, sticking with the Eagles today. Excuse me. We're going to go back to 1998. And on this day in 1998, the Eagles lost to the Giants 20-10 to end their regular season at 3-13. The lone bright spot on the day was Deuce Staley, who had 16 carries for 97 yards and a touchdown, including a 64-yarder. It was a foregone conclusion, though, after the game that head coach Ray Rhodes would be fired the next day, which he was. But a little bit on Ray Rhodes, and I think he's sort of one of those forgotten footnotes in Eagles coaching history, because you go from Buddy Ryan, Rich Kotite, and then it was like Ray Rhodes was the transition coach from the Ryan Kotite era into Andy Reid. Ray Rhodes was the first head coaching hire of Jeffrey Lurie, and he started off hot. He went 10-6, made the playoffs in 2 years straight. They won a playoff game, that big game against the Lions. But the thing with Ray Rhodes was he got the most out of his players, and they had some good players. They had some leftovers from the Buddy Ryan Kotite era. They did sign Ricky Waters, who became or was one of the best running backs in the league. But they were a second-tier team. They were not as good. I've said this a couple weeks ago. They're not as good as the Cowboys, Packers, and Niners. So they sort of just were. It's almost like NFL. I always talk about NBA purgatory. It's almost like the Eagles were in NFL purgatory, where they were good enough to make the playoffs, but they were not on that elite level. And part of that was the player. They had lack of quarterbacks throughout the time of Ray Rhodes. I think you had Randall, Rodney Peete, Ty Detmer, Bobby Hoyne. Like, you had these guys that just they couldn't get the quarterback right. And I think that's what plagued them. They had a solid defense. A lot of good things happened during the Ray Rhodes era, 4th and 1. They, like I said, that wild card win. But Ray Rhodes was good at getting the best out of his player. He was a good motivator. But after those first 2 years, I remember there was a lot of talk in the media and in the newspapers about how his shtick, I guess they called it, where like he would challenge players' manhood and was a yeller and a screamer, sort of started to wear off. They took a step back in 97, and then it completely went off the rails in 98. So kind of a mixed bag for Ray Rhodes, but I think he's sort of one of those forgotten guys because he was, I guess, like a transition. Jeffrey Lurie was still learning how to be an NFL owner. But the whole Ray Rhodes era did lead to Andy Reid getting hiring, and we've talked a lot about how great that era was. That 98 season, though, did earn the Eagles the second pick in the draft, which we know they took Donovan McNabb. And I will say, I think Lurie probably, I'm sure Andy Reid wanted a quarterback as well, but I think Jeffrey Lurie, due to just the ineptitude of the quarterback position during his first few years as head or owner, I think that's probably why, and he probably pushed to get a franchise quarterback over Ricky Williams at the time. But 98, that draft for the Eagles wasn't too bad. They drafted Trey Thomas, Jeremiah Trotter, Brandon Whiting, who played well, but also was the trade chip to get Terrell Owens for the 2004 season, and Ike Reese. So a lot of those foundational pieces of Andy Reid's 4 straight NFC championship teams, they were kind of put into motion during the end of Ray Rhodes' era. You also had Brian Dawkins come in during Ray Rhodes. Hugh Douglas was signed. So a lot of pieces were in place. It's just the whole Ray Rhodes shtick, as they called it, had come to the end, ran its course or whatnot. So on this day in 1998, the Eagles lose to the Giants 20-10, ending their season 3-13. Pretty much a foregone conclusion. Everybody knew Ray Rhodes was going to get fired, which he did the next day. So we know that all led to Andy Reid, Donovan, and that golden era of Eagles football. But that happened on this day in 1998. We will have more on the Eagles and the injury news, and keep an eye on what's going on with Jalen as the day goes on. We'll have more on that tomorrow. Sunday, we will have the 3 keys to the game, so stay tuned for that. No Sixers or Flyers game tonight. That's okay. It's this week is so weird. Nobody works. Some people work. Some people don't. It's perfectly acceptable to start drinking at 8 a.m. Just so much going on, but nothing at all going on, if that makes sense. But be safe out there, people. This has been This Day in Philly Sports History for December 27th, 2024. My name is Jim Montgomery. Go have yourselves a feel-good Friday. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.